Okay, so we are live. So hello everybody. I've prepared for you a small presentation today to talk about the hair procedural in Guerilla. So we're gonna talk about the procedural way to generate hair at render time. It is more or less the same techniques used to instance object on surface, but today we are gonna talk more about the Fur side of it. So by the end of this course, you should be able to reproduce this kind of sample that we've included in the last Guerilla build. So let's start with a simple scene, just to start easily. So okay, I have a render graph with the base, just a skylight, the surface shader, and assigning all my objects to the different layers and trace sets. And I've created a render graph for my fur. So for now, it's very basic. I just have a cube and plane and a light. And I want to generate some fur on this cube. So I will just click and drag the cube in my scene, just to generate a path that catch the name of my cube, just in order to be able to pop some fur on it. And I'm gonna create a hair and fur node. So this is a procedural node which have some presets on it. It's more or less the same node for the instance, procedural instance, but the presets are different on it by default. So if you look at the procedural node, you can see you have many different inputs. It has parent, hairs, instance, and scalp input. So we're going to talk about them one by one. So the parent input is just to define which will be the parent of this generated fur. So if I just plug this hair into my network, for now, if I evaluate my scene, I can see that the hair and fur have been created at the root of the scene. But if I want to create it as a child of my scalp, for example, or maybe I could choose another node, like I could create an empty node just to be the parent for the fur, and let's rename it, for example, root, and I can use this node as a parent for my fur. So here I take my root as a parent, and if I evaluate my scene, I can see that the hair and fur have been generated under this node, but it can be any node with any transform if you like. So once I have a parent, I can attach a scalp. So it will be the geometry I will generate instance on. So if I hit render now, I can see that I've started to generate some fur on my scalp. So if I dive in the procedural node, I can see that I can have many attributes to control the look of my fur. And let's start with the density. So I can add more fur and see that it's just updating in the render. And here, on purpose, I choose to generate my hair on a cube to start, just to show you that if I was to smooth my cube, so let's just make an override on the cube here to subdivide it. So if I was to smooth my cube, so it happens a lot of time. If you have a production character, you're gonna smooth it once you get his Alembic nodes before to have the fur on it. So it's why I'm showing that to you. So let's subdivide our cube to type and smooth it. And now you're gonna see that the fur no longer follows the surface of the scalp. It is because we have to mention to our procedural node that its scalp have been subdivided. So here you can see that in the scalp option of the hair and fur procedural, I have a scalp subdivision option. And if I turn it on to the same number of subdivision that my cube have been subdivided, now my fur is following the scalp. Okay, pretty basic for now. And it's not going to be very complicated, you see. So let's increase the density. So now we start to have some fur, a denser fur on our cube, which is now a sphere. And I have many options here. We're not going to cover every option of the Fur procedural. You can just go and play with it, but we're just going to talk about the main ones. So here, if I want to play with the length, I can just here have an absolute length factor. So here I can just play with the length of my fur, and I can also play with the min and max length if I want to have a various length per fur. So it makes a less procedural look, a bit more natural, because all the hair, if they have all the same length, they start to look a bit unnatural. So here is the basic control that you might expect on a procedural. I guess nothing too much surprising. So what else could you expect from a procedural hair generator? Well, let's go down and see what we have. So clumping is something that we always want to have. So let's add some tip clump. And for now, it looks a bit weird because I have a very low density of clump. Okay, let's increase the density of my clumps. So here you can see that I can add some clumps density based on the fibers. So you can see here that I can use the guides, but I definitely on purpose left the guide an instance input for later. So as you can see for now, all my hairs per clump seems to have the same length. It is because on the length mode, I'm in a scale mode for now. If I go to cut mode, every hair will have a different length based on its initial shape. So it doesn't change the shape of it, it just cut the hair along the string. So maybe you can just illustrate that to make my point. So if I have, well, my sphere, if I have some hairs like that, if I play with the min-max length in a scale mode, it's not going to change the shape of the fur, it's just going to scale it from its root. So it's just going to make that, or that, or that. So it doesn't change the shape, just the scale of the hair. But if I in cut mode, it's going to preserve the shape of the clump, and it's just going to cut the hair along its length. So for example, some of them are going to be cut like that, some of them are going to be cut like that. So the clump shape doesn't change, but every hair inside the clump gets cut randomly. So with the clump like that, I have different length for every fur. So you can see that you have much more option in the clumping. So you can clump the middle, clump the root, and change the middle position just to have a different look for your clumps. So it's not as controllable as what you could do in a Yeti, for example, if you had clumps of clumps, the one after the others, but it already brings you quite a control on your fur. So also here the ratio is interesting. So if you have more fur, let's just put more fur just to see what happens if I increase density. You can start to look a bit unnatural if all the fur are clumped inside of the description. So I can choose that some of the clump are not affected by the clump. So here the ratio here is at 1, means that all the clumps, all the strands are going to be clumped. If I get down to 0.8, I can say that 20% of my strands are not going to be clumped. So here my strands are a bit too wide. So you can see that I also have a width parameter with a multiplicator for the root and the tip. For now, let's just decrease a bit the length of the width of my fur. Okay, so we've seen the clumping. You have also other attributes like the scraggle or the curl. It's all very common attributes you are expecting to see on fur. So the scraggle is just gonna put some noise on your fur. So the frequency, based on the frequency, you're gonna have more or less perturbation on your fur. And you can see that for now, I just seem to have made a general perturbation, but I don't feel the noise on the strand itself. It's because I have to add more segments on each strand. So if I go to the geometry tab, I can see here the segment per fiber, and maybe let's crank it up to 10, for example, just to have enough point to describe my squiggle. So here it's a number you have to play with carefully. You don't want to put more segment than what you need. So here I just put 10 just to be able to see a bit more what I'm gonna do, but if you can stay lower, stay lower. Then we've seen about the squiggle. Maybe let's test a bit the curls. So with the curl you can just define the radius of the curl and the number of spin it does along the length of the strand. So here maybe it's a bit too large. And maybe I need a bit more segment because I asked the fur to turn 5 times along its life. Okay, so these are procedural stuff. I have no guide yet, and it's just described by parameters. So here it's pretty simple for now. Let's jump to the sample scene that I've created lately. So now if you have the 2.2.3 version of Guerilla, you can go to Help, Samples, and load the fur scene. And you should see this little dude appear. And here I have a render on the other side. So here is the result normally you should have if you press render on the scene. So let's just take a look at what made this scene a bit special. So for now I have a scalp, which is very basic, which has been subdivided 2 times. So if I go and check here is attributes, you can see that it has been subdivided. And I'm just gonna recreate the procedural just for you to see a bit what I've done here in this setup. So you can read the descriptions, but let's recreate a part of the setup just for you to see how it's built. So I need a scalp. So let's take the scalp. And I need a hair and fur node. And I need a parent. So here it's just the instance itself. So let's plug the parent. Let's plug the scalp. And let's just add that to replace the initial fur setup that I have for now. Okay, so let's hit render. And you can see that I have just very basic fur on my surface. So let's play a bit with the density. That's more fur. And I can see right away that I have too long fur for now for what I want to have. So let's reduce the length. So I have now a more acceptable length on the fur, but I would like to have different lengths per part of the body. So what I can do to do that is to use a material override on my scalp. So if I take a look here at my length, you can see that I have a length shader out settings. So it allows me to make a length shader on my scalp to modify, to multiply these absolute length parameters based on the attributes that come from the scalp. So it can be either a texture, which is going to be the case today, or it could also be prim attributes, parameters that you have embedded inside of the vertex attributes. For example, in Houdini, if you've painted some attributes, you could totally re-export your scalp with the attribute embedded in to drive, to multiply these procedural shaders. So let's do it. So I'm going to create a material override. And I'm going to drive this shader. So length. Let's create a length shader on this one. It's going to be a float because I just want to override it as a one float parameter. So let's add the length parameter. And you can see that now if I hit render, it's going to be bold because my length multiplier here is at 0. If I put 1, can see I'm going back to my original length. And 2, I can just force the shader to be longer than what it's supposed to be. So here is just one float value, but I could map this attribute with a texture. So let's do it. And I'm gonna just use a texture node, and let's just go and take this one to plug it inside this node, and it's gonna be a data gamma. So I don't want to put a gamma correction on this one, as it's values, straight values from Mary. So if I take a look in Mary here, I've made a simple scene where I'm just painting different masks to use in my procedural. So here, if we take a look at the length parameter, you can see that most of the body is at 1, and some parts are at 0.2. So to do that, I usually just create a color node, which I reveal in some area, so I can just enter manually the values I want to paint. So here I say, okay, let's paint some 0.2, and I know that this area is going to be 5 times smaller than the other areas. So let's take a look at what it does here. So normally if I hit render, you see that this area is now smaller than the other areas. So it's how you map an attribute inside of the mappable attribute of the procedural in Guerilla. So let's add more, a bit more fur, just to see a bit better what we do. Or maybe too much. Let's stay simple for now. Oh, actually, we're gonna stick with the 100 for now. It's more readable. Okay, so now let's say I want to make some inclination on the fur that follow a bit more the surface. Not that just pointing outwards doesn't look very natural. So let's go to the orientation. Yeah. So let's put some inclination on the fur. So maybe I can put some auto refresh and just tweak the inclination. So you see that for now I can put some inclination to make the hair point down, and based on the polar, the fur are going to be rotating one way or the other. For now, I believe it's based on the UVs, and as my UVs are pointing upside down, vertically, sorry, the fur is kinda well oriented from the beginning. But if your UVs were different, it wouldn't work that way. So here, a good way to work is to use a vector map from Mary to orient your fur. So let's take a look in Mary at how to do that. So for now, let's say I want to make a new channel. So I already have a vector here which is painted, but let's see how to create a new one. So I want to create a new channel. I can rename it polar, for example. It needs to be 16-bit half or 32-bit float, but 16-bit half I find it enough. The file space here, you could put it in vector, but I find that Mary does some weird export modification if it's not in normal. So if someone can explain that to me, I would be happy. So I stay in normal, and it should be raw data, scalar data. Okay, so let's create this map. Now in our shader, the principal BRDF is applied on my object. I'm going to say that the vector is going to be the polar channel that I've just created. Now I want to display the vector in the viewport. So I'm just gonna click here. I hope you can read my screen because actually I'm on a 4K screen, but I'm streaming HD. So I guess it might be a bit hard to read the screen. So listen to what I say. So if you don't have this icon here, you just have to right click here and check the vector painting check mark here to be able to have this this little icon here. So here you see I'm looking at the vectors, and if you want to change the look of the vector pre-visualization in Mari, you can just click here in the vector inspector, and you can just change their length and their spacing. So it's just a previs of what the direction will be. And you have to be in vector space mode screen. So if you don't do these things, you might paint a wrong map or have a wrong pre-visualization of your map. So once I have that, I can go on the base layer of my polar map channel, sorry, and I'm gonna go and pick the vector paint tool. And the vector paint tool should be in vector paint flow mode. Okay, so once I have that, I can just come and paint directions on my object. So now I can just start to lay down the flow for my maps. So here, maybe the tricky part where you can have some kind of direction change in the fur. So you can just spend a little time to paint your map, but at the end, the result for me was a map like that, where I just kind of make a noisy transition here in this area. Could need more work to make a nicer flow maybe. So once you have this map, just export it as an EXR 16-bit float. And in Guerilla, you can go and create a new shader here. So it needs to be called Polar. So let's go and check in the orientation tab here. I can create a polar shader. And if you have many descriptions, you could rename this shader as something else. It could be polar furry ball, for example. And if I change this name here, I just need to make the same name here when I create the attribute. So the furry ball here, it needs to be a vector because the direction for my fur is a vector map. So let's create that and again map it with a texture. So let's go and take the map that I've already exported for the sample. And again, this one is data because I don't want to have any gamma correction on this. And once I've created this shader, I need to specify the procedure to be in direction Mary style. Okay, so now if I hit render, I can see that my fur is oriented as it was in the Mary scene. Okay, so what else did I do on this procedure? So I'm not going to rebuild every of these steps because it's mainly the same thing every time. So if I take a look here on this scene, let's just plug this one, or maybe let's just plug this one for now. What else did I have done? So if you take a look, I've mapped the clamping tip, the clamping density. So if I go back in Mary and check my different masks, you can see that I have a clamp weight. So I wanted to have too much clamp in this area. So the clamp weight, I use it to map the clamp tip. The clamping density, I wanted to have thinner clamp on the belly area and wider clamp on the rest of the body. And the color ramp here is for the shader. So here if you take a look now, I have a clamping tip, clamping density, which are plugged in this procedure. So here if you take a look closer, I have less clamping in this area, thinner clamp here than on the side area. So it's a bit of playing back and forth between Mary and Guerilla to tweak this map properly. So it might be longer to make a look depth for your fur that way. But what it allows you to do is that it describes the look of your fur without having to be based on a specific scalp or a set of guides. It means that you could have different variation of your character and have minimal tweaks to do if the UVs are similar. And also you don't have to bake anything else than your animation to get the fur be properly deformed in your scene at the end. So if you have a lot of characters, like if you have 20 rats, for example, to render in your scene, you don't want to have a super complex grooming system and have to bake every guides for every rat. You could have a description based on the UVs and this kind of setup to be faster and lighter. So you don't have to generate heavy hair cache for each character, and you just let Guerilla handle this complexity at random time. So it's pretty convenient for that. And here I've just created another procedure which is the same actually than the first one, and the only difference is that it's a bit longer, so and much less denser, just to have this kind of guard hair, you call them, to break a bit the outline. So if I compare the two of them, this one or this one, you can see that I just added a few stray away hair, which is actually called guard hair on animals. I'm not a fur professional, but sorry if I'm a bit brouillon, I don't know, draft on the subject. Okay, so this is for the basics of procedural. I guess you can just go and have a look at the things I've modified here. You can always, on every node in Guerilla, just show override only and see which are the parts I've played with. So like that, you can directly see what are the difference based on a basic procedural node. It's very simple actually. All these stuff are not very complicated. So sample scenes, new proc. Okay, what's next? Okay, so when you generate your fur with a procedural, by default it doesn't create, it doesn't inherit all the attributes from the scalp, like the UVs for example. You have to specify it for it to generate. So if you go in the attribute tab here, you can see I've checked the generate ST and generate ID. So ST is, stands for the UV actually of the scalp, and it's gonna allow me to put some texture on the fur based on where they've been generated on the scalp. So let's jump to the shader now. Let's plug the hair shader in it, and I'm just gonna create a basic albedo AOV just to see what I'm doing with the hair shader albedo. So here I'm using the R2 shader. I'm not gonna speak too much about it. It's the new Disney implementation of hair shader that Pierre introduced in Guerilla a few months ago. It works very nice. What you need to know about it is that by default it is kind of a brute force way of making the hair shader, but here if you go in the shading tab, you can see that there is this min bounce attribute. Actually it will make 2 bounce of diffuse light bounce brute force, then it's gonna switch to an approximation to make the render faster. So it's my way of describing it. I'm not very technical actually. I'm sure Philippe will tell you more about it maybe in an upcoming video. So yes, so that was for the shading, but basically it works very nice out of the box. So I didn't change anything on the shader, I just played with the albedo color. So let's take a look at the albedo color. So for now, I have a mask which I've painted in Mari. So here in Mari, if I take a look, I just have this color ramp. So it's just a map of where I want to have light hair and where I want to have dark hair. And I didn't pick the color in Mari, I just choose them in Guerilla because I wanted to show you this way of remapping things inside of Guerilla. So here, if I just plug the output of my mask in the render and hit render and take a look at the albedo, you can see that I have just a basic ramp, and my fur is taking its color based on the UV attribute of its scalp. Then I'm remapping these black and white values into a color ramp. So here I've just choose this color, but it could be anything else. Then I'm using the randomize color node in Guerilla based on the attribute ID. It's why I've generated the ID attribute on each strand before on the procedural, just that I have a random, I have a different attribute per strand to generate some randomness on the fur. So here, if I take a look now at this one, you can see that I've made some slight randomization in the hue, saturation and value. So you can just push the U random if you want to have more extreme variations on the U. But here I wanted to keep it pretty subtle. So the more you push it, the more it becomes a multicolor. But it's not the goal here. So let's go back to the original value. So here it's nice to have a little difference of color per fur, per strand. Then I'm using another trick I like to do is to create a random value per hair. So again, based on this ID attribute, I'm gonna generate a 0.5 color which have a randomization of 0.5. So it means that I can go from 0 to 1 per hair strand. So if I just plug this one on the output, you can see that every first strand have a different value, and I'm going to use that to remap it in the ramp. And what I do here actually is I say, okay, my value is a random value, and depending on this value, so if you are below 0.8, you're going to be from the normal color I've decided here. If you are above 0.8 and you are in this white area, you're gonna be white. And if you are above 0.9, you're gonna be this darker brown color. So it allows me to decide the percentage of every fur color I want in my system. So let's just take a look at it. Maybe with some more harsh colors. So here I could just unplug this one and say, okay, let's not make blue. Let's put some very noticeable color. So green. So most of my first strands are green. Some of them are white. So here I can just play with these values to change the amount of each fur I want. And these ones are gonna be my darker hair. And you can see that again I can play with the percentage of this one just by changing these values. Because mainly what it does is that my random value hits randomly inside of this range, and you have more chances to be green and less to be white, a bit more to be red. So it's just a way of making the repartition for this fur color. Let's cancel the weird stuff I've done to go back on my original setup. Okay. And something else that you could do is that you might want to have a different color based on the length of the fur. So here you want to get the UV attribute of the strand itself, not the UV of the scalp. So for that you can use a little node which is called curve UV, and I believe we're gonna deliver it to you soon. I think it's not on the default Guerilla version for now, but the curve UV allows you to get the UVs of the curve. So let's make a gradient, and I'm just gonna want to take the V value. So let's isolate the attribute. So here it's a vector for now. I want just to have the green component, so it's the Y component, which is the V actually for the curve. So if I remap the V in a ramp for now, I can just take a look at it and say, okay, let's make a gradient from red to blue. So now I'm taking the UV of my strand and mapping a color along the way. So I guess you could have a shader that make this tip color and a root color, but you might have sometimes a need for more colors along the way. So here I could add some more values and say, okay, I want it to be blue, but then become green again at the end. You can look at rabbit's fur sometimes and have different colors along the fur. So here you can just put as much as you want based on the V of the fur to map this change of color along the way. And you could totally do that kind of thing. So let's say, okay, I have a more complex setup here with some randomness and stuff, and I just want the tip to be lighter and the roots to be darker. So I could just use this as a driver for my ramp, and I could say, okay, let's remove this one. I say, okay, the tip of my hair is gonna be this setup, and the root of my hair is gonna be this setup but darker. So maybe I could put a color correction node. oops, sorry, no, what was the name for it? Color. Correct. Oh, I don't remember. Sorry, let's just put a multiply for now. And I'm just gonna take the value of my setup, multiply it by 0.8, and say that it's gonna be my root color. But you could have two different setup, completely different setup for the tip and the root. And now you can see I'm just a way to make my root darker, but I keep the advantage of all the rest of my setup. So here, if I just maybe offset the root, you can see the effect of it when I'm darkening the root of my setup. Actually, I don't see it very well. Let's put 0 just to see if it's working. Yeah, okay. So here, if I just offset it to the top, you can see that I have this darker roots. Actually, is it working? Seems like it's working. Oh yeah, it's just the scalp underneath that we are seeing through. Okay. It was just, but I didn't use it for this setup anyway. This curve node, but it's something that you might want to you might need if you do some maybe cat fur or rabbit furs, where the root of the fur sometimes is lighter than the tip, or sometimes the opposite. Okay, so let's just go back to the original fur setup. Okay, so this mainly sums up the setup for the sample scene. I just wanted to show you a little advantage of this kind of setup. It's, as I was saying, that you could have many rats and use one setup. So for now, you can see that the scalp path expression is pretty inclusive, so it's not allowing for anything else than the mesh body shape to be the scalp. But I could make a more inclusive path and say that all the meshes which are mesh body shape will be scalp for the fur. So if I go up and just duplicate my Fury Ball instance, and I'm just gonna up. If I translate it aside, if I restart the render, it generates the same fur on the other object, and you could have as much object as you want. It's gonna do the same. Okay, so you can see, I guess, the advantage of this setup. Okay. Then, yes, you might be wondering about the Fur input of the Fur procedural. So I've just created another scene before the presentation, just to show you how you could use guides from Houdini to make some description that you couldn't do with maps. So you lose a bit some of the advantage of the full procedural version, because you will have to bake some guides, but you don't have to have all the fur stored inside of the cache. So the guide cache is actually much lighter than the render hair cache. So might be an in-between solution between the full procedural or full baked solutions. That you can just have the hair guiding your procedural. So here, if I take a look, I just made a small grooming scene inside of Houdini, and I just created firstly all these guides. And the only difference now on this setup is that instead of generate fur preset, I've chosen the interpolate guide options. And these guides are directly fed inside of the hair input. The instance is going to be for the procedural instance node, so we're not going to speak about this one today. So here I just put the guide inside of the setup, and all the rest of the attributes are the same. So you can see I've kept my density attribute, my clamping tip, my clamping density, but I've been able to remove my length attribute, because the length now is driven by the guides. And I removed also the polar attribute from Mari, because now the direction is driven by the guides too. So Okay. So that's it for the things I wanted to show today, I guess. Let me check at my list. Yes. So it's time for questions, if there is any. Is there any question? Is it possible to work these maps with Substance Painter? The polar maps in Substance Painter, I don't believe there is any options like that. Maybe there is a way to. No, I don't see a way to do that for now in Substance Painter. If you know the value, maybe you could, but I don't believe. Is there any other question? Maybe I can take a look at the live feed. By the way, first sample is shipped. Okay, so if there is no questions, we might end up this live. I'll just let you think a little bit more if you have any questions. Anyway, there is the Discord also, Discord channel, and we are always there answering questions if there is any. So we invite you guys to join the Discord if you have more questions too. One question from Philippe. I'm sure it's going to be a tricky one. One question. And tell me if I forgot something also. No? No question? Is it enough to instantiate characters? Good questions. I've never tried. I never tried to instance a furry character. I know that you can spawn characters with fur, but instance them, it should work. Should we try, or maybe on a crash Guerilla? Let's make a try. So let's try to instance a character. So we haven't looked at the instance today, but we might try to instance my character on the plane. Let's see if I don't crash Guerilla. I've never did it, so maybe Philippe have the answer actually. So let's create a new scalp. It's gonna be my scalp for the so if I put, for example, my furry ball as an instance. Let's try. Maybe I can deactivate the fur for now, just to see if I can first instance my furry ball. Okay, so I have my furry ball instanced on my plane. Let's reduce a bit the density just to make sure I don't generate too much fur. It's not magic. Density 1. Okay, let's maybe even reduce a bit more. Okay, and if I reactivate my fur, does it work? Yeah, it seems to work. I just have to extend the bounding box of this. Oh, it's magical. But here I'm gonna show you some stuff that we haven't seen today. Bond extension. Yeah, it does work. Maybe let me hide my cyclo. army of 30. It seems to be working, but maybe I have some problem with the scale attributes. I don't know. Oh, maybe it's working. Seems to be working. Whew, you rock, Philip. You rock. I didn't even thought of trying that. Guerilla is full of surprise. Unlimited cuteness. Yeah, let's try to make unlimited cuteness. Let's increase the number of instances. Is it gonna handle it well? So let's make it 10 times more. 10 times more cuteness. Okay. Let's make it even more. As it's instance, it's handling it well actually. So okay. I guess it works. Of course, it's gonna be taking a little while to sample. Okay. Any other question? Maybe is it possible to instantiate geometry into the fur to do little rock into the fur? I believe that if you want to instance some object inside the fur, you need to generate another scalp for that. So maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't think you can make a procedural instance based directly on the fur. Like using the fur as a scalp for an instancer, I believe is not possible. But maybe, again, we should try. But I don't believe so. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe Cyril or Philippe. See you there. You can use the procedural to generate instance instead of fur. Yeah, the procedural is both for generating instance and fur. You just have to change the presets. But I believe Philippe is gonna have an introduction on this subject too. Even though we've covered quite similar points, I guess, because most of the attributes are the same. You just don't use the same tabs for the instance. Like for example, the clamping or the curls doesn't apply to instance, obviously. Okay, so if there is no more questions, fur are ribbons with no surface. You can't instantiate on it. Yes. It could be cool, actually, yeah, to be able to generate some little dust on the fur. What I do for that generally is that I generate some fur, basic furs in Houdini. I scatter some points on them, and I export these points inside of Guerilla to be able to use them as a scalp to instance some dust or some little object on the fur. But I have to do this in 2 times. Like I have to generate this point cloud in Houdini. Okay, guys. So if there is no more question, I'm gonna cut the streaming for now, and maybe let's meet on the Discord if you have more questions. And I believe next live is gonna be by Philippe. So thank you all for attending this live, and see you next time.